Thanks everybody for being here. We appreciate it. This is an important piece of the puzzle for logistics and supply chain in the region. I'm Craig Turner. I think I know everybody on here, but just in case, I'm Craig Turner, with the Executive Director for the Buffalo Niagara International Trade Gateway Organization and President of World Trade Center Buffalo Niagara. We put both organizations have a big stake in what we're going to discuss today, so we kind of put it together as a joint meeting. And I know there's folks from all different aspects of economic development in Western New York. I think we got Niagara County, Erie County on here. I appreciate you being here today. This study it's been an absolute pleasure working with GBNRTC and Fred and the WSP team, and as well as the two counties over the past 18 months or so. And it was a very interesting process. I'm just going to give you my perspective on it, because we set out at the beginning to update the 2010 regional freight study, on which many of the projects that you've seen happen over the past several years came out of, including the creation of the ITGO, of the Buffalo Niagara International Trade Gateway Organization, was one of the recommendations in that 2010 study. So we set out, I think, fall of 2019 to actually had a kickoff meeting at our event. Had, I think, about 40 people there for the discussion to get it going. And then WSP dove into the process of updating the agenda, and then COVID hit. So when the world changed, not just temporarily as far as the way we all had to do commerce on a daily basis, but certainly with long-lasting implications that had to then be worked into the plan. So it was very, very interesting going through this process and seeing how global supply chain was changing, and Buffalo Niagara's place in all of it. And I'll personally say, I think Rich and his team at GBNRTC and Fred and his team at WSP did a fantastic job on this study, and looking forward to having you all see it. Before I turn it over to Rich, I just want to give a quick housekeeping. We're going to, if you have questions during the presentation, go ahead and type them in the box right while the presentation is going. We'll do a formal Q&A at the end, but if we want to make sure that if you have a question on a certain topic, it gets asked at the same time. And Ashika from World Trade Center, and I will keep an eye. We'll keep an eye on that chat box while Fred's presenting. So, but then if you have bigger questions at the end, we'll have the Q&A at the end too. I am recording as you get ready to ask questions. So just, obviously if there's questions you want to ask that aren't for the public, we can connect you with Fred and Rich after the program too. So thank you again. Thank you for being here. Thanks to Rich and Fred for taking some time today to do this presentation for us. And Rich, I'll turn it over to you so you can talk about GBNRTC's role in all of this.
Thanks, Craig. So my name is Rich Guarino. I am the current acting executive director at GBNRTC. I just wanted to give a little bit of overview of who the GBNRTC is, if you're unfamiliar, and to set up Fred for his presentation on the meat and potatoes of what's included in the freight study. So GBNRTC is Erie and Niagara County's designated metropolitan planning organization. What are MPOs? MPOs ensure federal spending on transportation occurs through what's called the 3C process: comprehensive, cooperative, and continuing. We're a cooperative association of area governments and agencies. Our members include Erie County, Niagara County, City of Buffalo, City of Niagara Falls, NFTA, New York State DOT, and New York State Thruway Authority. And we're focused on making transportation investments to leverage regional transformations. Our primary responsibility is planning and programming transportation improvements within the Erie and Niagara region. So that's basically who we are. And now I'll give you a little bit about what the freight study update involves. Craig gave a little bit of this in his introduction, but as he mentioned, the original study was done in 2010. It was quite extensive study. We were only the second MPO in New York State to do a freight study, the first being New York City, which is an entirely different animal, as you can imagine. So we were the first non-New York City MPO to do it. So that left a little bit of it was a little scary because no one had ever really done it. No one was really sure what to include. Freight at that point was a lot more reactive, and that, problems arose, solutions came out, and you were done with it. Now we're more focused on planning, freight planning, so that we're creating opportunities rather than just reacting to problems. In addition, there have been some federal, state, and regional guidance that's come out in the last 10 years. In terms of federal, the last two transportation legislations, MAP 21 and the FAST Act, included specific language on freight planning. And the current transportation legislation, the FAST Act, actually includes specific set-asides for freight projects. The feds also came out with a national strategic freight plan, which helps guide freight planning throughout the country. In terms of New York State, they came out with their own state freight plan in 2019, which we were heavily consulted on. And in terms of regional, the Regional Economic Development Council came out with a strategic plan, and my own agency came out with our updated long-range plan called our Moving Forward 2050 MTP plan. So we need to reevaluate the industry and the economy that has changed so dramatically in the last decade. Some of those changes we've seen are changing and improving public perceptions of freight. Freight, 10, 15 years ago was seen as a dirty thing. Nobody wanted anything to do with it. That perception has changed. You look at the TV commercials now, and now all of a sudden you see commercials for logistics and how logistics can improve your life. So I think that has a lot to do with the changing perception. In addition, we've become a Willy Wonka, I want it now society, where everybody wants their overnight shipping, and shipping is much more of a focus to get those goods and services where they need to be as fast as possible. We've also seen some technological advances, things like EVs and automation, cashless tolling on the thruway system. And we're now viewing freight more as an economic opportunity in terms of shipping, warehousing, support industries, workforce development. So we needed to look at where we are now, where we want to go, and develop a set of projects and recommendations to help get us to where we want to go. We received several interesting proposals to do the study. WSP was selected. Fred Frank was the project manager of WSP. And as Craig said, I think he did a fantastic job. He was great to work with. We got a really good product out of it. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Fred to present some of the results of the study.
All right, thanks, Rich. I'm going to share my screen. And while I'm doing that, good morning, everybody. As Rich said, my name is Fred Frank with WSP. And I want to be sure to give credit to Maya Miller, who's from WSP, who also did plenty of work on this in terms of developing the plan. So thanks to her and the others that worked on this. So you should have up on your screen now. What I wanted to do is just go through, I'm not going to go through the full plan that we developed, but I thought I'd go through a couple of the key elements of it. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat and we can get to them. But it was important to know that this study, it was a combination of a lot of input from you all, stakeholders in the freight and logistics industry, binationally, both here and in Southern Ontario who were involved, but also a lot of data that came from Federal Highway Administration and the freight analysis framework and anything like that helped to input this. So to kind of kick this off, we developed a value statement to kind of drive and lead the framework of this study. So after talking to everybody and working with the steering committee, it kind of was settled on that this region we should promote the Buffalo Niagara region as a premier binational hub for freight and logistics industries integrating green or sustainable platforms, and is an intermodal gateway for freight and goods traveling between the binational region and the ports of New York and New Jersey and other East Coast locations. And in doing this, the word green or sustainable came up because there were a lot of stakeholders who said, well, there's plenty of binational locations, locations located along the border, but what could really set us apart, and I know Erie County is taking this as a major platform too, is for this region to be accepting and willing to promote that green and sustainable platform. And if you look at what Erie County is trying to do with the Bethlehem Steel, that is a green, sustainable type economic development approach there. So we added that as a, let's be a little bit different than everybody else, and not just be a binational hub, but let's be a platform from green and sustainable platform as well. So as I mentioned, all that input that came together, we kicked this off in late 2019, and probably would have been done quicker if it weren't for COVID, but that happened and we couldn't ignore it. So we went through some of the stakeholder input. We had a steering committee that consisted of DOT, Erie County, Niagara County, and ITGO. We talked to a number of stakeholders on this side and on the Ontario side of the border, in transportation and planning, economic development, and freight and logistics. So we didn't want to just hear from the people running the trucks on the roads. We wanted to hear from the people who are developing the warehouses and the people in charge of providing incentives to those warehouses, and how do we attract the business here that helps promote the freight and logistics industry. Numerous individual meetings, participation in the Niagara University Supply Chain Forum, and then an online survey that was live for about 4 months. So as I mentioned, we pulled a lot of data from federal sources, the Census Bureau, Federal Highway Administration. So one of the things we did is we wanted to get an idea of where is freight activity occurring in the region. So what we did is we pulled at the U.S. Economic Census, we pulled employers who have employment codes that are typically associated with freight and logistics. So that could be retail, it could be warehousing, it could be industrial, it could even be agricultural. And some of those areas you see out in southern Erie County or rural parts of Orleans and Wyoming County, that's probably some more of the commercial agricultural operations that are happening out there that are generating some truck activity. But for the most part, probably not surprising, you see a lot of truck activity generated around Lockport, where there's some industrial parks, Tonawanda's, Amherst, Cheektowaga area. A lot of that's probably driven by warehousing and retail. So this kind of gives us an idea of where the activity is occurring in the region. And then we also pulled some bottleneck data that we can get from, and this is taken from in-cab units. That data is then sent to FHWA and used to help assess where congestion is occurring with trucks. So on the left is where congestion is occurring on a regular basis, daily, Monday through Friday, and on the right is where congestion occurs because of incidents or crashes or weather-related events, things like that. So when we look at the two are very similar actually, and you're probably not surprised to see the congestion is occurring on a lot of locations that you would expect it to occur. So 290, 90 main line, 190 area as we get through downtown, and a couple just smaller areas, maybe Genesee by the airport, and some spots over by the outlet malls in Niagara Falls. You'll see a couple spots that, and remember, this data was taken probably late 2019. So what you don't see is any congestion related to Grand Island bridges, because at the time those tolls were removed. But what you do see on here that has probably since been removed is a little congestion around Lackawanna and Williamsville tolls. Since those have been removed, I would guess that the congestion at those points would be less than what's shown on these. So then we dive into the freight analysis framework, and this is a tool that the federal government provides to all metropolitan regions, and it's a look at 2018 data and how we look at forecasts for 2045 in terms of freight and goods movement. So as a region, our economy is expected to grow by 30% from 2018 to 2045. Now, in last year, about a year ago, when COVID hit, we went back and looked at all this data again and said we should probably put a contingency on this because we don't know what COVID is going to look like. How are we going to come out of this? I mean, as it turns out, it was a boon to the supply logistics industry, but we didn't know at the time. So we built a contingency plan that says, okay, let's do 30% less growth than what we're expecting. And so if we are, as a region, we're expected to grow the demand for goods amounting to over 33 million additional tons, 47% growth in the freight and logistics industry. We did a contingency on that in case it didn't amount to that. So that's hidden in the plan, but since things seem to be picking back up, I didn't want to spend too much time on it. But we are looking at annual freight activity to grow about 1.7% up through 2045. And in that table, you'll see a bunch of different modes and how they're expected to grow. Trucks, we're expected to see truck volume grow about 43%, rail about 150%. And I will say a lot of that was generated based off of the plans in place for the port authorities, New York and New Jersey and other ports that want to get containers onto rail rather than truck quicker. So a lot of that increase in rail activity is probably due to containers going from ship to rail and then coming into the region that way rather than truck. Water expected to grow about 50%. We are expected to see a decrease in air freight. A lot of that probably due to the fact that high value goods that are shipped by air are most likely going to come into the larger airports like JFK or Toronto and then be trucked or put on rail here. It's just not becoming feasible to send a small amount of volume to the Buffalo Niagara airport unless it has a really high value. And then, pipelines included and then multimodal included in here as well. So again, overall, about a 47% increase in overall demand for goods. We also took a look at domestically where freight coming into the region is coming from and where we're sending it to. So the graphic on the left kind of looks at, here's the Buffalo Niagara region and freight that's coming in, a lot of it coming in from within New York, but we also have Pennsylvania, we have Ohio, and we have New Jersey as some of the larger ones that are bringing freight into our region. And then where are we shipping freight to? Some of the larger ones are West Virginia, Texas, Pennsylvania, Ohio, other parts of New York, a little sliver of New Jersey, Massachusetts, over here is Connecticut. So a little snapshot of domestically where freight is coming in from and where it's going. And then we also look at the international markets. And the thing that stands out here is our trade with Canada and how it stands out against any other region across the globe. So we are definitely a big trading partner with Canada. That's why when we came up with our value statement, we said being a binational hub is definitely going to be our future. And a lot of that trade with Canada, what we think is going to happen is growth in the ports of Halifax and Montreal and even Vancouver. Those ports are really growing, and we may start to see more international shipments coming into those ports and coming to the region through Canada. The freight analysis framework also gives us a look at truck volumes on the highway. And this is a snapshot of some of the major highways and how truck volumes will come in and out of the Buffalo region. The red line is a decrease in truck volume, and the blue lines are an increase. And I'll explain the expected decrease between Buffalo and New York. And like I said before, it's because a lot of the ports along the East Coast are looking to get their freight on rail. So as the volume of freight would actually increase, the amount of volume being shipped by truck is expected to decrease between New York and Buffalo. So whether that's shipped partially to Syracuse, whether it's shipped all the way on rail to Buffalo, we do expect there to see more of this volume being handled by rail. So not so much of an increase in the truck travel. But what you do see is heavier volumes going up to the North Country, and I think that's reflective of an increase in the Port of Montreal and Halifax, and maybe more of that freight coming in by truck over the border crossings there. Some of the emphasis areas that we looked at, and now getting into some of the projects. So we did all that background work and looked at data, but what Rich and his group really wanted was, okay, we need a list of projects that we can start to identify and push for funding for. And some of them are policy or planning items that, hey, maybe we need to get on some of these items and push for how do we increase the freight and logistics industry here in the region. So some of our emphasis areas, obviously those impacts and disruptions caused by COVID-19 were a big player. We wanted to advance some of the projects from that 2010 plan. Craig mentioned some of the successes there. We have a number of infrastructure projects, probably 40 or so projects that are actual infrastructure related projects, and a lot of that is related to enhancing freight and goods movement through efficiency rather than capacity. So what we're going to start seeing is the cost of actual transportation and infrastructure projects are going through the roof. If you've tried to build anything in your house, you've probably seen the cost of that going through the roof. So we're going to have to focus on how can we make what we have more efficient rather than adding capacity. We're just not going to be able to add lanes everywhere. So we got to be more efficient, focus on nodes. Where can we make some spot improvements? We have to prepare for electrification and automation, and then just keeping all this in a state of good repair and keeping it safe. And a lot of our policy and planning items, not infrastructure projects per se, but things we need to keep on top of, long-term transportation funding, promoting and facilitating that cross-border trade, just letting people know that it's really not difficult to maneuver the border, and maybe we need to facilitate that better. Enhancing our region's connection with the ports and international ports, targeting economic development and workforce training, and then some kind of a better regional collaboration between our developers, our economic development, and our freight and logistics industry. So I wanted to just highlight a couple projects that came out. Like I said, 70 or so project sheets sit in that freight plan if you want to go through it. I'm just going to hit on some of the key ones that really came out of it. Again, promoting this region as a green cross-border logistics hub. That's going to involve involvement of a number of organizations like ITGO and NYTEC's Cross-Border Committee and the Western New York Regional Economic Development Council. Building upon, Ontario has a number of strategic investment and procurement agreements, SIPAs that they call them. They have one in place with Maryland, and it'd be good to see some more of those come into play, because what Ontario is looking to do is come up with certain agreements on, hey, certain states in New York, you're a preferred trade partner for X, Y, and Z. And so we're looking to see if New York can become preferred trade partners. Making some site and pad ready sites. You know, we've heard the term shovel ready, but I think we need to take that one step further and get some of our economic development into site and pad ready, so that somebody that wants to come look on site can have a warehouse up in a number of months rather than 2 or 3 years. We're going to have to think about how we can repurpose some of those big box stores that are turning into gray fields. So maybe those become local distribution or fulfillment centers, or for return centers for online retail, things like that. And then temperature controlled warehousing came up as another big topic. So a couple other big areas that came up: establishing regional truck and delivery electronic charging stations. We really don't have that here. Some fleets might have some at your own places, but we don't have those public charging facilities. So we actually heard from a lot of stakeholders in Canada that said, look, we're looking to go electronic with our fleet, but if we deliver into the US, we're a little bit nervous that we're going to get over the border and not have a place to charge up. So it'd be great to have some charging stations and maybe do a demonstration project with that. Implementing the I-190 integrated corridor management strategy. And this is something that's getting off the ground with NYTEC and GBNRTC, and we think should be pursued. It's really a pilot project to see how we can make our highways, again, more efficient rather than adding capacity. So there's a number of strategies that we're going to start to look at along 190. Variable speed limits, variable toll pricing maybe, so to get people to travel more during off-peak times rather than peak times. Can we do some arterial signal coordination so that maybe some of that traffic is willing to jump over to an arterial street rather than taking the highway? So over the next few years, you'll start to see more of this happen as a 190 pilot project starts to evolve. And then we'll see if any of these can be transferred over to some other highways in the region. We want to be able to expand our cross-border, our border crossing information, so that as a truck is approaching the region, they can find information on how long it might take them to cross into Canada before they've already gotten to 290 or 190. So they can make this decision, 20 miles or so before they get into the region. And maybe if they're approaching the Clarence rest stop and they see just delays all over the place, maybe they'll just pull into the rest stop and say, I'll wait it out a little bit before getting up all the way to a bridge and getting stuck in a 45 to an hour and a half delay. A big one that came up was enhancing the workforce development for freight and logistics jobs. I know Craig and ITGO has started working with NCCC on can we start to promote some workforce development, but we as a region, we're spending a lot of effort on economic development, trying to attract the businesses here. And what you all told us is, this is great, but we need people who are trained and are able to work in the business so we can just hire them and grow our freight and logistics industries. So continuing that workforce development is a big push as part of this plan. I won't go through all these, but a number of future planning projects that probably need to be looked at a little bit closer. And really, these were all those bottleneck areas that you saw in those maps. So a lot of our I-290 interchanges, I-190 downtown. Can we look at some of these interchanges to make just some small improvements? Again, because we're not going to see large scale capacity projects. Let's improve some of the intersections and just make them a little easier to maneuver. Some of these other ones, a Buffalo logistics complex actually came out of the 2010 plan. We may have to go back and find another site if Lakeside doesn't work out, but that idea is still here. Working with Erie County on the agribusiness park, is there an opportunity for rail there? Looking just a little bit outside the region, one of the things we noticed when we looked at the freight analysis framework is there's actually a lot of trucks who divert from I-90 or I-390 if they're traveling between the region and New York and use, 93, 20, 20A, and maybe there's an opportunity here for Rich and his group to work with the Rochester MPO, the Genesee Finger Lakes, to understand how can we keep trucks on the highways on 90 and 390 rather than traveling through Batavia or through Warsaw. We're going to see more electrification. So this region will need to think about curbside management and autonomous delivery policies. I know that Domino's commercial is out there where the guy puts the pizza in the little bot and travels and drops off pizza to somebody. We'll probably keep seeing more and more of that. Amazon's exploring it. So we're going to have to come up with policies as to, are we going to see larger trucks pull into an urban area, park in a hub, and then send all these little bots out for their final delivery? And are they going to use the street? Are they going to use the sidewalk? We're going to have to think about how those are viewed. Long-term planning for international rail crossings. There's so much ownership and operation and maintenance uncertainty with those bridges that we need to start thinking about. If we want to maintain those rail crossings internationally, we're going to have to work with all the partners. And then maybe there's an opportunity to collaborate with the Port of Buffalo on some new market business planning. We referenced the Port of Cleveland as a good example of a private port that was doing some different markets. So there's an opportunity to work with them there. So again, that's maybe 5 or 6 of the 70 or so projects that are in there, but I don't want to go on and on and on. You can look at the plan. It's posted at gbnrtc.org, or if you want a copy, you can email myself or Rich or Craig, and we can arrange to get you a copy and take a look at some of the projects that are in there. My contact information is there. And I will say that if you have a group or an organization that you might think could benefit from a presentation, we're willing to present to any other organizations. So with that, Craig, I had actually turned my chat off, so I don't know if I missed any during this, but let me get that back on.
No, nobody, no questions in chat.
Okay. So I guess with that, I'll open it up to see if anybody does have any questions.
Thanks, Fred. I actually do have a question, and you've all been on all these panels, and you know that the host normally has some softball question to get the thing started. But actually, I have a real question that isn't a softball question. When we, let's say 3, 4, 5 years ago, we spent a lot of time as a region and as ITGO talking about CNG, and it was the wave of the future. And then the price of gas went way down, and people stopped talking about CNG and started talking about electrification. The price of gas is back up again. Are people talking about CNG again, or is that behind us now?
It hasn't come up as much as electrification for sure. And it's still out there. There's some fleets that have converted, but the push now, and maybe it's because of where the administration is pushing things, but the focus on vehicles, whether it's buses, trucks, automobiles, the push has been on electrification of those. And that's what we've been seeing. Now, who's to say in 5 years some new technology doesn't come up and electrification is behind us already? That's the thing with all this. It's driven by, a lot of it's driven by the private sector and what's profitable and what's feasible.
Well, it's funny because you talked about the Canadian trucking companies saying they're nervous about coming down here because they don't know if they'll have the electric charging stations. That's the same conversation we had almost a decade ago, that they were nervous about coming down here because we didn't have CNG. Which is very interesting. Rich, I was wondering, could you walk us through a little bit about how this study is used now? What the next steps are from GBNRTC's perspective?
Yeah, well, I guess we talk about the implementation phase, and that could be done in a number of ways. As Fred mentioned, there are a bunch of policy and planning recommendations. Those are things that need to be either supported or further pursued. So we will continue pursuing a lot of those supporting legislation as need be, and hopefully getting a lot of those planning project-like projects a little bit further along so that they can be further developed into actual projects. As far as the projects themselves, we're pursuing multiple funding opportunities for those, whether it be through our capital plan, competitive federal grant programs, state programs. So there's a lot of different opportunities out there to get those projects implemented. So as we'll continue to work together and work with our member agencies to make sure that those projects are moved along and implemented when possible.
Excellent, Rich. Thank you. Any questions?
I had posted a link to our freight study. It is posted on our website. Someone was having difficulty getting the link to work. If you just go to our main webpage, which is www.gbnrtc.org, at the top of the page, you see a bunch of different areas. There's one called planning areas, and freight is listed underneath there. So if you go to that, you'll be able to download the study. It is quite large, so there's a couple of options available. You can either do the entire study, which is about 110 megabytes, or you can do individual sections of the study. So that's available. If anyone has any further problem downloading, as Craig said, just get in contact with myself or Fred, and we'll make sure that that's fixed.
Looking forward to any questions. We'll be spending a lot of time working on this going forward. I mean, a lot of the projects in there are things that we've started. I know Dan had to leave, but a lot of work is going into the Erie County Agribusiness Park, which has been great for a great effort for ITGO working with them, because through Dan's leadership, they really the county's really seen the importance of logistics surrounding that that parcel out there. So we're excited about that. There's a lot of really good things going on in here, and it's nice, from our perspective, being an advocacy organization, sometimes to have this document to go to our elected officials and say, here's what the community has put together, and here's what GBNRTC spent a lot of money on to give us a pathway forward. So it worked 11 years ago with the 2010 study, and we're looking forward to rolling this one out too. So
yeah, I just also want to expand a little on what you said about the collaboration. Our steering committee was consisted of Erie County, Niagara County, ITGO, New York State DOT, and everything that was produced was thoroughly reviewed, commented on, revisions made. In addition, status reports were given monthly at our planning coordinating committee meetings, as well as our transportation project subcommittee working group. So there's a lot of collaboration. Everything was kept very transparent. Lots of input was accepted, received, appreciated, and I think made this the product that it is. So appreciation to all of those that were on the steering committee and helped put this together.
thanks, Rich. Dean, did you have something you wanted to?
Yeah, just two comments, and that is as far as takeaways go from here, providing electrical charging stations, especially for trucks. If it's not already on the radar for Niagara and Erie County, you're probably 5 years late, because this is a reality that's coming. I've ordered 6 Tesla trucks that I'm due to get my email shortly to say that they're going into production. So I certainly am not waiting for the infrastructure to catch up. But that's typical about this sort of stuff as the counties, you do lots of studies, but you don't actually get any feet under them until it's too late. So it's good information, but there's two areas, one being understanding what the trends are and staying ahead of them and getting out to the influencers to get this information rather than we just spend all of our time looking in the rearview mirror and saying, yeah, we talked about that, but we never actually did anything about it. That doesn't make a survey or the amount of work that's been put into here very fruitful. And I think the way you feel good about something like this is it actually gets into some point of an action plan. And the second thing is with regards to shovel ready, pad ready, those are wonderful terms, but they mean absolutely nothing. I was told I was shovel ready, and I think the only thing that was ready was a shovel. There was no infrastructure, there was no utilities, there was nothing. And I ended up paying for all of that, including the brown owl that couldn't finish its nesting until I couldn't build until he finished his nesting. So again, some of that doesn't hold much water to me, and I don't mean to be critical of it. It's just that you got to get it past the glamorous report into something that's got some meat behind it. As far as investment goes, you can have all of this stuff ready, but you haven't involved any of the banking side and the financing side, which all of these companies are going to need to connect with. And have they even seen a report like this so they can say, hey, for example, in Canada, we know that the Port of Halifax, the Port of Montreal, and the Port of Vancouver, they just added a second Prince Rupert up there to be able to do a deep sea port. The cost of bringing containers into Canada is 30% less than any place in the United States. So obviously there's going to be a huge push because containers have gone from $7,000 to $20,000 recently to get from Asia. So they're certainly not going to pay the port fees that they pay throughout the United States. That's another discussion for them to, the port authorities to figure out how they're going to handle their costs. But the amount of traffic that's going to be coming down from Canada in the next 5 to 10 years will probably hit that report's number that was 45 years. And so I think there's a huge opportunity here. But and in Canada, just for an example, because the banks are so intertwined with the logistics business, one bank, the TD Bank, which you guys see down in the US, has an entire division just on logistics. It's all they do because how big of an industry this is. So I would encourage you to get this information to the financing people, to the capital people who should prepare themselves to say, if we're going to have a 45% increase in the next little while, we should be ready to help support these industries. And some of this information is extremely valuable at giving them the supporting information that says they should make that decision and make it sooner than later. So I think that's just two suggestions. I think the charging stations, I think certainly Niagara and Erie County should be on the forefront because we're the first crossing over the border, and Canada by rights is probably faster in line to get electric trucks than most that are out there. So I know that those pilots are already started. I've asked to have a pilot from my facility, which is right at the border, to be able to do that and open it up to outside truckers who need to charge if they need to. So I think you've got some great information. I just think we need to make sure you get some feet under it and make sure you get it to the investment community so that they were willing to support the ventures that you see that would be needed to drive this thing. That's my comments.
Great pointing. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here. Thanks to Fred and Rich and Maya for putting together the presentation for us today. Like I said, if you have additional questions, we can funnel them. A lot of you have Rich's email directly or Fred's, but if you can always email me or Ashika and we'll get the questions into the right place. But we appreciate it and thank you. And there's gonna be a lot more coming as far as rolling this out and talking to people. Dean, great point about getting it to the banks. I know the elected officials are, if they haven't heard it already in the last couple of weeks, are going to be hearing about everything soon. So appreciate you being here, and we will keep you posted.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Thanks for the opportunity.